Have you ever wondered how these really big streamers have these really awesome overlays? How do they do it? The answer is custom stream widgets that interact with their audience. This can either be a subtrain, alerts that permanently change the overlay, or even something simple like animated labels. Okay, now there are a lot of things that are necessary in order to create such a custom widget. And that is why I'm going to split the tutorial into two parts. For this video, we are going to break down some of the templates that Streamlabs or StreamElements provide to us, so that you get a basic understanding of the programming behind it. Don't worry, you don't need to have any prior experience whatsoever. I am also going to show you where you can find help if you need any, and how to customize the widgets. In the second part, we are going to build our own custom stream widget from the ground up, so definitely make sure to subscribe and tick that little bell button, you don't want to miss it. Just a note to all the programmers out there, I'm going to use slightly altered explanations and terms, so that it's easier to understand. Please be aware of that. As I mentioned before, custom widgets are pretty similar when it comes to Streamlabs and StreamElements. For this tutorial, we are going to use StreamElements. And without anything left to say, let's get started. So if you're logged into StreamElements, expand the Streaming Tools tab and go to Overlays Gallery. In here, you can already see a tab that says Widgets. Go ahead and click on that. Here's an important side note. Depending on the platform you use to log in, there might be more or less different templates. This is because Twitch is still the #1 streaming platform in comparison to YouTube or Facebook. Some of the widgets do still work on both platforms, but Twitch just has more templates. Alright, so now we are going to select the events rotator. Once we're done, we can head over to my overlays. Select the events rotator and hit edit. Now a new window with the editor loads, and as you can see, there's a bunch of stuff here. You can toggle the visibility of the text fields on the left if you click that little eye icon. But be aware that this is now also visible on your stream. On the left with a text field with some valid parameters. So what do they mean? On the left side, you see the names of the parameters. In our case, those are label statistics provided by StreamElements. On the right, we can see what this parameter, so to speak, returns. The double curly brackets are nothing else than a simple way to access the data. Don't worry about it too much, just remember this gets the data. But what we are really here for is, when you scroll down, the custom widget 1, which is a really brilliant move to name it that way. So let's just double click on the name and let's rename it to something more reasonable, like CW for custom widget. Events rotator. Now select it by doing a single click and go to the settings tab. In here we can see all the fields that are configured, but what are fields anyway? In a custom widget you can see the fields as predefined settings, where you can configure the widget very easily without editing the code behind it. When you scroll down a bit, you can see some settings that might look familiar. Follow our latest, for example. Remember the curly brackets? So what's happening here is that follow a latest has an attribute called name, which returns the name of the user. So what is getting displayed is welcome and the username. The cheer latest, for example, has 3 attributes: name, amount, and message, but only 2 of them are used here. We can add message here if you want to display the written message as well. Alright, I think we've talked about the editor enough. So let's scroll back up. Now, if you want to edit the widget itself, you want to click on Open Editor. Once you did that, you might be thinking, whoa, this is getting complicated. But bear with me. There are 3 different languages StreamElements supports: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. In short, JS. The Fields tab is basically the configuration file for the fields we've seen before. So what do these languages do? Well, HTML is basically your screen. This is where everything gets displayed. Without HTML, you would see nothing, and it works the following way. You can think of HTML like working with Photoshop or GIMP. The so-called tags can be compared with groups and layers. Let's say I want to add a text on an image that is on an image as well. So what happens if I move the picture that is the furthest in the back? Everything changes with it, and that's basically how HTML functions. The layers are represented here by so-called HTML tags, which need to be opened and closed. In between the opening and closing tag, we can insert another tag that needs to be opened and closed, and so on. So let's break down the code we have here. We have our top layer that opens with main. Inside it, we have a sublayer which contains another sublayer. And that whole process repeats until the main layer is closed in the end. Now, have you noticed the parameters class and ID? A class is basically what you can compare with styles in a Word document. Everything that has the same class is going to look the same. The ID, however, is unique, so only that element is going to change if we use it. But how do you even know what a certain class looks like? Well, that's where CSS comes in, because CSS is used to style our HTML page. For example, in here we can change the appearance of tags, classes, and even IDs. But how does anyone know what can be changed and what not? Well, I'm glad you asked. Both HTML and CSS have great documentation, and I'm leaving everything down in the video description below. By the way, I should mention that everything we've talked so far was static, which means that it just stands still, no animations whatsoever. That is because HTML is static by default, but CSS can help us by introducing keyframes. Now, depending if you've ever edited a video with complex text animations or something similar, there's a good chance you've already come across keyframes. But for those of you who haven't, here's what they do. Keyframes basically define the position of an object over a certain time span. So if we say that an object is here at the start, but needs to be over here after 2 seconds, then we can set 2 keyframes. One with the object on the left side at 0 and one on the right after 2 seconds. Now, if we play it back, we see that the object moves between those 2 keyframes. The same functionality can be applied to create cool animations in CSS. For that to work, we need to define an animation with a specific time onto an object. The keyframes are defined separately in an animation called anim/startLeft in this particular case. We can find it here. The keyframes are set in percentages, which work with the set time span. Alright, that was a lot, so let's take a break and recap what we've covered so far. HTML uses tags which have the same functionality as layers. They support attributes like, for example, classes and unique IDs, which can be accessed with CSS. CSS is responsible for the styling and animating of HTML pages, whereas we can manipulate HTML tags with just naming them, classes with a dot and the class name, and IDs with a hashtag and its name. Here's one thing you should always remember when doing a bit of programming. Think first. The cool thing about programming is that it's logical. Of course, programming is still hard because you have to learn the process on how to come up with logical ways. But it is still logical. So my advice, sit down, think about what you want to create and try to make some steps. This is my background. This needs to be on top of my background. And so on. Use my references about the Photoshop layers and the word styles and try to imagine what you want to achieve. So first, we need a screen. Remember, HTML displays everything. So we need an opening tag. For example, a main or div tag. It doesn't matter. And a closing tag. On that screen, we want to display another layer. So let's make another div and so on. Styling. We have 3 layers, but want 2 of them to look the same. Remember the word styles. We want to create a class. We also want one element of those 2 to look different. So let's also add an ID to that. Just sit down and make a plan. The rest just falls into place by either asking the community or just using the documentation. For example, StreamElements has a Discord server where you can ask developers on how to do certain things. They're more than happy to help you. Okay, let's move on. It is great that you now know how to display and animate a bit of stuff. But how do we get our audience interaction? For this, we need JavaScript. But if you take a look at the template, then it becomes apparent that we need a bit more time to explain this. Don't worry, our own widget is not going to be that complicated. But we've reached a point where I say, okay, it doesn't make sense to break down the template any further without showing you a live demo. And this also accounts for the Fields tab. We are going to cover these 2 when programming our own custom widget. The current plan, by the way, is to program this live. So if you're not subscribed to my second channel, then I recommend you to do so. Otherwise, I really hope you enjoyed the first part of this tutorial and I could already give you some ideas on how to improve your own stream. So if you've liked this video, then you know what to do. And also consider subscribing if you want to see more of it. The more likes, the faster the second part comes. And without anything left to say, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, I'll see you around.